What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Celtics Talk podcast here on the NBC Sports Boston podcast network. And today's focus is on Ime Udoka, the first-year coach of the Boston Celtics, a man who was tasked with doing what Brad Stevens could not and pushing an elite group of players to a new level. And what I find most interesting when I reflect back on the first season with Ime, and certainly there's more of this story to be written in the playoffs, but Ime was very forthright in his introductory press conference about what his expectations of himself were and what he wanted to do with this Celtics team. And I think it's just remarkable to go back now. It wasn't that long ago. Well, I guess almost a full year, June 28th, 2021. As he's being introduced, Ime sort of laid out the plan for the season. Now, a lot of coaches do this. They say big things. Hey, it's your introduction. You're not going to be up there and be like, yeah, we want to be a 500 team. And maybe making the first round of the playoffs would be great. Ime came in and said he was going to be demanding on his players. He chided his new boss in Brad Stevens about assist percentage from a year ago. And just pretty much laid the foundation for what would become the identity of this Celtics team. So today, as part of our look back at Ime Udoka, I'm going to go back. I'm going to play some clips from that press conference and just sort of marvel at the way Ime saw the vision and his dedication to sticking to it throughout the season and ultimately delivering the Celtics to the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. And I think the clip that jumps to mind first for everybody is him needling Brad Stevens about the team's assist percentage. So let's start there. Let's hear Ime getting a little feisty on the podium when he called out Brad Stevens about the Boston's lack of ball movement during the 2021 season.
As far as stamp on the team, what I was as a player was a tough, hard-nosed player, defensive-minded, but I love the offensive side as well. I've done defense the last 2 years in Philadelphia and Brooklyn, but for seven years in San Antonio, I was doing offense and defense. And so, we want to have a well-rounded team. Looked at the numbers overall. Sorry to mention this, Brad, but 27th in assists last year. We want to have more team basketball there. But at the same time, you have to understand what your personnel dictates, and that's Jayson, Jaylen, and guys that can really score the basketball at elite level. So you play toward their strengths. Obviously, we'll have a defensive mentality going in, and I like to try to bring the dog out in guys. And we got some young dogs here, and look forward to pushing them.
All right, so the Celtics assist percentage through Christmas of this season was 57.6, ranked 23rd in the NBA. If I'm Brad Stevens, I'm up there, and the offices are pretty close. I'd be walking into Ime's office, maybe saying, were you on me about 25th in the NBA last year when you guys are only sitting 23rd? Not much progress yet. But you could tell it was Ime's goal to get that. He comes from a San Antonio team that had that 0.5 system where it had to move the ball, and it's all about getting good shots off of being unselfish. Since Christmas, Celtics are up at 63.1 assist percentage, 8th in the NBA in that span. The Celtics actually finished the year at 14th overall, 60.9% for assist percentage. And, that's tremendous strides. I'm sure Ime would like to see the Celtics bottle up what we saw at the end of the season and get everybody to do it for a complete year. And then those numbers would really shine. But he got the buy-in this year, and it took some time, and it took everyone kind of figuring it out. I always go back to January 23rd. Marcus Smart comes back from COVID, and that's the instance where it sort of flips. And Marcus played different in terms of pushing the tempo and promoting the ball movement that this team had been lacking. And that number really spiked from there. And the leaps that Jaylen and Jayson made at the end of the season. So why did everybody sort of get on board with that? Why did it take a few months for Ime to break this team of some bad habits? Well, it's probably because he was holding them accountable. And I think that was the other prevalent theme in his initial press conference, just demanding that players will make strides. And his job was getting them to buy into it in a way that Stevens had not. And so that became Ime's trademark, being hard, especially in post-game press conferences. But again, he said it from the start. Let's listen back.
Thought Brad would be here forever, so it was just a natural connection with those guys that I had. And They're going to allow me to coach them, push them. They know I'm going to be on their ass, and that's what they like about me. They've asked me about that. And so they want to be pushed. They want to be directed towards winning, and you expect that from your stars. The character that they showed, like I said, they all have different personality traits. Marcus is one way, Jaylen's one way, and Jayson is as well. But the bottom line is they want to win and help us get number 18. And so that part was attractive. Obviously, you see the physical talent. Now it's a chance to help them grow, become better leaders, more vocal, and then just continue to push them to be great.
Thought it was interesting. Ime knew from the start, what he was getting into, but he also knew that the stars of this team would be willing to accept criticism and allow him to push them. I love that line. I'm going to be on their ass, and that's what they like about me. It's one thing going into a season for a player to be like, yeah, I want a coach to push me. I want him to drive me to new heights. It's another when you get into the season and your team is struggling and your coach is on you about why aren't you moving the ball? Why aren't you being a better leader? Credit to the Celtics players. Brad Stevens had this philosophy of internalizing everything and sort of the idea that, losses were his fault and he would never pin the blame on specific players. It was so rare to hear him come out and point fingers. But Ime never had a fear with that. That was sort of became Ime's calling card to a point where some of us in the media were like, is this the right idea? Because when you're not winning games, you run the risk of either losing your locker room or, backfiring with superstar players. It can go south in a hurry. Just the opposite. It was Ime's pushing that might have turned this thing around. We heard about that film session in December after they come back from a road trip, 75 clips loaded up. And Celtics players pretty much, every single one got a little taste of Ime's wrath and, what you can do better and just the minutia of the game. I think it's telling that the Celtics, the turnaround really started probably closer to mid-January, but the wheels were turning at that point. And you could tell even before they launched in late January that they were moving in a better direction. But ultimately it came down to pushing the two elite stars on this team. And I thought it was interesting that Ime from the jump was like, these are the two pillars. He put all the pressure on Jaylen and Jayson and sort of challenged them to emerge as those superstars of this team.
It's something that you see, and the perception of them outside of this organization is all NBA level players, MVP caliber players, and getting to know them over the last few years, you've seen their growth. They've taken huge leaps this past year, and we look forward to them continuing in that progress. It's my job to put them in situations to be successful, push them to be greater. And like I said, the sky's the limit with those guys. When all the job openings happened this summer, I think it was pretty evident that Boston is the most attractive based on the organization, the history, the expectations, but also the players in the roster. You have two foundational young pillars like those two. It's exciting to build around them, continue to help them grow and reach their potential. So sky's the limit with those two. We're excited to work with them and continue to see them grow throughout their career.
I love the way Ime framed it. He put all the praise on the Jays, but also sort of left open that window like, yeah, they've done it all individually. And they've checked all those boxes with, becoming an all-star or all NBA or stats and all that. But really wanted to see them grow into superstars. And sometimes, I know Brad Stevens has said that before. This is the hardest step. You can make that leap as an individual player and get your name in the conversation among the NBA elite. And we talk about top 20 player, top 10 player. But to be the very best in the NBA, you have to make everyone else around you better. And I just look now, and the end of the year, it was so jarring. I mean, Tatum did it a little bit earlier than Jaylen Brown, but the passing, the vision on the court, the confidence in passing kind of a double team, the understanding that you're making your team better by moving the basketball in those situations. I thought that's when the Celtics went from, a team that was surging to a team that was a legitimate title contender. And I think it's reflected in all the numbers. Boston elevating to the number one offense in the NBA over the final 35 games. And it's not just Jaylen and Jayson. And again, Marcus Smart getting some buy-in, but if the Celtics want to have any success, and I'll give credit to Scal here too, like he said it coming into the year, sometimes it's as simple as he needed to see their assist number go up. And if they did that, that meant they were making players around them better and that everything would kind of fall into place from there. And now when you watch the Celtics at the end of the season, it's just Jayson Tatum is so good when that double team comes and finding the right pass across the court, using that attention on him to make his teammates better. Jaylen Brown has been punishing teams who put that attention on Tatum and being a finisher, but also, even when he was the focal point at the end, when Jayson Tatum wasn't out there, making sure that everybody else got involved and seeing his own assist numbers go up. That's what the Celtics need. That's what they can't get away from as they move into the playoffs. And so, that's Ime's greatest achievement this year. You knew the Celtics defense had potential to be great. You knew they had to be better moving the basketball overall, but getting those two guys to buy into what it took to be a great teammate is what set this team apart and really pushed them to grow in that role. And, look, that was, he said it multiple times during that press conference. Just take a listen.
Talking to Kawhi Leonard as a young guy, and I used to tell him, why wait? What are you waiting for? These guys don't give him too much respect. And I'd say the same thing to Jayson and Jaylen. The sky's the limit. The fact that you're not all NBA, that should be a chip on your shoulder. You should play with that edge, and you want to prove people wrong. But my message to them would be, why wait? The talent is there. The work ethic is there. It's a chance to be a better leader and more vocal at times, but don't wait for anything. Go out and take it now.
All right, we knew the Celtics defense was going to be good, but it was clear Ime saw, part of the reason he was probably intrigued by this job. Okay, number one, you got Jaylen and Jayson, two superstar level players, both sub 25, who could carry this thing deep into the future. But Ime was a defensive coach, and he wanted to set that defensive tone. I think that's part of the reason Brad Stevens was so intrigued, because Brad had a defensive-minded philosophy and knew, he had to give him defensive-minded personnel. I think that's a big reason why Brad, even before the season, went out and re-signed Marcus Smart and locked up him and Robert Williams long-term, knowing that he was delivering sort of the pieces that Ime could really maximize. And now it took some time too, because, there was still Dennis Schroeder and Dennis Freedom on that roster, and Brad had to tweak it as it went along. It was almost jarring out of the gates when the Celtics defense struggled as much as it did. And some of that was just getting used to Ime's philosophies and the switching defense and just understanding role and personnel. But it was Ime who made the switch in January, brought Rob Williams more into the roamer role, let Al Horford protect that back line. And this thing really took off. They'd already been, a top 10 defense to that point. But they were lapping the field in calendar year 2022, ultimately finished number one in defensive rating. I believe they ended up tied with Golden State because they slipped a little bit late in the year without Rob. But I think it mattered to Ime that he had a guy like Marcus Smart out there, and he knew that could be your defensive tone setter. And now here we are, Marcus Smart, probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year. And, it helped Marcus's cause that the Celtics had the best defense in the NBA. I look at that number. I think it's 97 was Boston's defensive rating when it had starting five together. When Brad went out and acquired Al Horford before Ime's hiring, there was some hope that the familiarity, his defensive focus would mesh well with what was coming. But every decision Brad made from there was always around, how do I promote what Ime wants? How do I give him the pieces that he can best maximize? And credit to Ime for, again, the same way that the assist percentage didn't come right away. He was willing to sit there, and he knew the defense could be even better than we had seen at the start of the year, and getting them to grow. The ultimate question, and everyone's sort of always asked this on their first day on the job, is how quick can you get this team to another banner? And that's just the way it goes in Boston, where the focus is always on the next championship, the next banner that can hang in the rafters. And Ime got that question right out of the gates.
Yeah, what I'll keep going back to the talent. And when you have two young pillars at that age, the sky's the limit. And that's what it starts with. You're only as good as your players and where you push them to get to. And we understand. We've talked about this in depth. We have some work to do. And so that's my job, to bring out the best in them, continue to strive for what this organization is about. And it's about winning, getting number 18 in here. And that's our goal. And I think, like I said, we've all been aligned with that, in symmetry with what the goal is. And it's not about just getting to a conference finals or doing well in the playoffs. It's about winning a championship. And so anytime you have those young pillars, you have a chance. And I think that's where we're at right now.
So even when things were going bad, I think that's interesting. Ime knew, the focus always had to be on winning, because that's just what you have to do here, especially when you have the talent that he inherited. Most first years coaches get the chance to take their lumps, figure things out, go through a rough year, get a lottery pick, come back the next year, and then maybe you got to crank it up a little bit. Even Brad Stevens had that luxury. He came in the aftermath of the Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce trade. He's got all these draft picks. And he that first year, like he took his lumps. And, it was remarkable that he got the team back to the playoffs as quickly as he did. But even he had a little bit to learn and figure out how to be an NBA coach and go through it for a year. Ime didn't have that luxury. Now, it helped that he had been a player, that he'd been on some very successful teams, but it certainly took some time for him to figure that out. But he never lost sight of the vision. And I go back to this with Brad Stevens, is that it might have been really easy for the Celtics when they were 18-21 on January 6th to go, you know what? It's just not working this year. We either need to overhaul this roster or we need to put the focus on the future. And downshift, I was very worried that would just stick there in that sort of mediocrity zone and be back in the play-in. And, what does that do? That's a dangerous spot for teams who are trying to get better. But the Celtics instead stuck with it, just believed in the vision, believed that Udoka could turn this around, believed Brad would get the right pieces. And it all sort of launched from there. So credit to Ime. Again, the big thing I remember walking away from the initial press conference was Brad terming him warm but demanding. The sort of guy that the players would want to wrap their arms around, even though he would hold them to high accountability. And time again throughout the season, that's what he did. And he found the right balance between, maybe being a little gentler at first and then really ramping it up when he saw that they needed it, and always pushing them to the finish line of the season. And to go from 11th in the Eastern Conference on that January 6th to second just speaks volumes. I thought there was a chance that Ime would muscle his way into the Coach of the Year conversation. Certainly, there are other instances out there. Monty Williams and Phoenix, chief among them, probably deserved the award a year ago. The media leaned toward Tom Thibodeau and what happened with the New York Knicks. I think if Monty wins a year ago, Ime's got a pretty good shot given Boston's turnaround this season. But between that and Memphis, I just don't know. He might. I think there's a good shot Ime finishes third in the voting. Maybe he climbs up to second with Boston's surge. But that's pretty impressive for a first-year coach to come in here on a team that already had, fair expectations despite a disappointment the year before, and be able to muscle his way into that conversation. But the big takeaway, Ime set the groundwork when he came in on that June 28th, laid out how this exactly was going to go, and stuck to his word at every turn. And I think players respect that there was no secrets. He didn't pull any punches along the way. He just pledged to be himself and figure this thing out. And that's what he did. You can check out more of our Ime coverage on NBC Sports Boston. You need to subscribe. Like I said, we got a whole bunch more player days coming up this week. We did Brad, we did Ime. We're going to shift over to some of the focal points of the team in terms of players the next few days. And we got some real special guests hopping on to talk about them. And everybody to go subscribe, check us out on the YouTube page. We'll catch you next time on the Celtics Talk podcast.